Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in. Welcome everyone to a special edition of my Hybrid Trends podcasts with our partners from Microsoft. We've been talking about the concept of Cloud Beyond IaaS and how we can drive cost optimization. We started with 4 episodes introducing the core concept of cost optimization, and then also our 3 main conversations in this area around hybrid cloud, app modernization, and AI and data. So we're now diving into each of them topics, and I'm excited to be joined by Michelle from Microsoft and Sam from our Microsoft team to dive into the topic of app modernization in more detail. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves to everyone?
Sure. So Sam Swaby, Senior Solution Architect at CDW's Microsoft practice.
And Michelle Azzopardi, UK Digital and App Innovation Go-to-Market.
Thank you. So in part 1, we really defined what are the migration terms, level sets with people to make sure that the rest of this conversation is all based on the same foundations. In this one, we're going to look at, well, what is required to actually start this process? How do you actually get from wherever you are now to actually having that plan that you talked about, Michelle, where all the business units are aligned, all the people are aligned? How do we get from where we are day to day to where we want to be? So maybe I'll come to yourself first, Sam, around what are the core considerations here? We talk a lot about we need to have the right amount of data to make the right decisions, but is that just, hey, I've got a free tool to do that, or is it a bit more involved than that?
That's right, Rob. Yeah, we need to be armed with the data before we can start to do the rationalization process. So there are tools out there, either free or by third-party vendors that typically do charge. So a natural one, especially if you're making a move into Azure, is to use Azure Migrate, which is completely free tooling, which collects data on usage of your source workloads and dependencies, connectivity, how it's chatting amongst each other. But what we find usually is that is a massive data that you can't use the tool natively to then do that rationalization piece. So yeah, that's where the third-party vendors come in to give a little extra layer of capability in terms of bringing that data all together. Beyond that and beyond the data, obviously need to know various things about the application we're dealing with. So what does the application achieve? What does it do? Those dependencies I mentioned are usually in the data, but you still have to rationalize those as well. They could be chatting to a database. They could be chatting to a file server. Then there could be a complete unknown in there. It's chatting to something externally with an external IP. Well, you have to validate all of these things before you start really understanding the application that you need to make recommendations around to the 6 R's.
So what we're saying there really is that the tooling is great to give us data, but the context of the data that's in that tooling is something we're not going to get from a tool. And if we just rely 100% on the tool, the likelihood is we're going to make some sort of mistake. We're going to end up causing an outage. We're going to end up having the wrong costs or the wrong outcomes to that side of it. So does that mean then really we need to start thinking about how we talk to the app owners and interview them, Sam, and actually start that sort of a much more sort of human process as part of the overall engagement?
100%, Rob. Yeah. It's pretty much the first thing we would do is get the application owners. There could be numerous. So we want to talk with those owners and understand those things that I alluded to. And they will know the challenges they have. Is it a monolithic app? Is it something that was built in-house with proprietary to the business? Do the people that know that application still work for the business? Do the applications looked after by a vendor? Does that vendor still exist? Is it still in business? These are the things we come up against. And as much as you can try to get to these details, sometimes you're just not able to find it out. So you have to focus more on what the application is achieving and then take a very different route, such as replacement for something that will be supported and does use a more modern approach.
No, that makes sense. And Michelle, from your perspective, I guess
we get these basics right. We have a dependency map. We know it's a VM. We know it's this. We've got an idea of talking to a file server here and that. But from a code perspective, is there a bit more detail we generally need to get into to understand whether we can re-architect, re-platform, etc.? Where does that come into the decision around how was that application built in the first place?
Yes, definitely, depending on the application. And if you get access to the code, then you could determine where that application would land, whether it would be a container or something else. It's important to use the right tooling. And now, actually, with AI tooling for assessing applications, we can almost go a step further because we are getting better at not only understanding the basics of applications, but also helping us modernize. Even we have seen within customers as well, where we're able to bring COBOL applications now onto Azure because we don't need the person who's an expert in a COBOL application. We can have AI tools that is able to modernize the code for us. And so there are two aspects here: modernizing the code from you have some really legacy code sitting on mainframes, perhaps, but also modernizing the application. So it's kind of a two-part process, and AI has definitely helped us do that. GitHub Copilot has also enabled our developers to kind of not to hesitate because they feel maybe they don't understand what the application is doing. This will help them to understand the code, understand the structure, and help them to bring that feature and functionality into modern tooling and modern services, but also build on from that.
No, that makes sense. And it sounds like potentially a lot of change can come into an organization through this process. You know what I mean? We've been used to managing an infrastructure and applications in one way. We're now talking about doing it in a very different way. And there's lots of new terms we've thrown around there, from different versions of code to AI to microservices to containers to platform as a service, all these wonderful new terms. But to a team of people that maybe haven't been used to that, there must be a skills challenge there, Sam, that we need to really think about.
Yeah, definitely. And it is probably one of the key reasons that slowed down a customer to adoption, because they can kick that can down the road, so to speak. It takes, again, a lot of commitment to then get a whole team upskilled into an entirely new area. If you think you initially move into cloud, you have to learn the nuances of Azure as it is. So Entra ID, Azure IaaS, how VMs work, how disks attach, how networking is best approached in Azure. That's a learning curve. And then we're also asking for you to potentially then open the door to these native tools, the nirvana of cloud, where we all want the customer to go, but that is yet another curve in their upskilling. So this is highlighted as a key point in the cloud adoption framework, as you must engage with that upskilling plan very early on, because it's going to be a journey, right? And once you're on that journey, it's not just about looking after your apps and your infra. It's about your teams, your culture, and your skills.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Michelle, do you see that from a sort of building DevOps practices and that change in mindset as being part of the sort of the success factors of actually of a modernization program, as much as doing all of the discovery and that sort of stuff?
Definitely, that's another aspect to it as well, right? So DevOps is a different way of working amongst developers. It's bringing developers and operations together. There will be some form of change management that would need to happen. It's not siloed anymore. So there's a cultural change around how applications are going to be managed going forward. It's a bit of a shift left approach as well, right? You're thinking about how the application is going to be deployed whilst you're kind of building it. You're thinking about your operations. We did a test internally in Microsoft a few years back when we were going through our own application modernization exercise. And basically, what they did was the team who was developing the applications was put on the operations kind of team for a few weeks, for them to understand the impact of leaving that bug or not implementing with the right guidelines, policies, what that impact was. And they kind of learned from each other so that when they went back to their development team, they were able to think about what impact this was going to have on the operations side and kind of bring it more together, have that understanding. So sometimes almost shadowing what it means to have deploying into cloud can help kind of surface and bring more, I would say, harmony within the teams.
That's a great idea, and I've seen that used in so many different aspects. I've seen support desks putting support staff into frontline roles for weeks so they can understand the pain that someone's under when they ring support up, etc. It's a similar practice, isn't it? If you have to look at what the impact of your decisions are, you may change your mindset for your decisions from that side of it. And Sam, I mean, when we look at this, it feels like this isn't a single team or part of the organization that can drive this entire process. It feels like we need to have the security teams involved, the application teams, the line of business owners, finance people from an investment perspective. Do you see that as it's a very sort of multi-faceted and disciplined project rather than just being an IT-led outcome?
Yeah, and it's really critical to bring those teams together as well, which you would expect most businesses would have those units within the business communicating, but that's not always necessarily the case. And I think any of us could be guilty of focusing on our priorities and what we need to do as an immediate, part of our job. And that's what we see quite a lot within customers. So security aren't talking to application owners. NetOps aren't speaking to application owners, or people that deal with identity and access aren't necessarily speaking to security that often. And you have to bring all of them together to make this a success, because they are key stakeholders to make those decisions and make it workable for the entire business, not just one unit. And that's compared to a model that we're seeing nowadays, as opposed to core IT, where all decisions were made under one roof and they kind of just rolled with it, and all the knowledge was just there, and it was, a lot of red tape and quite hard to move things along.
That makes sense. So we've got an idea there around where tooling can help, where sort of teams of people need to be brought together, where we've got to go and dive and get that information from the people that understand the applications and the business processes, where we may have to just give up on that and look at the business outcome rather than the application. Maybe just as a closing statement from you both would be, what would be your number one tip for the listeners as to how to go and start this process? What's the first thing they should do if they've either not migrated to cloud yet and are starting to start that journey, or they have migrated but they're still sat in that sort of interim stage? What's the first tangible thing that's going to make the biggest difference to them?
So the first step is to start to discuss it. Let's weed out some of the facts. Let's have a look at some of the data if possible. If you have existing architecture, if you're really close to the application, and we can at least start to pick things apart without running a full-blown assessment, that kind of gets us to a point of, does this have legs? Beyond that, my recommendation is then going to be running a pilot, a POV. That way it's mitigating risk. You don't want to go straight in there on your production applications, which are probably business critical. So let's prove this works and then take it from there.
All makes sense. And Michelle, what's your top tip to end our this part 2 on?
Yeah, so I'll add on to what Sam said, and then the other thing to think about is your application is going to land on Azure. So have you looked through the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework? We have lots of guidelines there to help you along this process. Think about landing zones. If you don't have the right landing zones, that could also slow down your application modernization. And then also eventually thinking about the well-architected framework. So I say those 3 things would go hand in hand on when customers are embarking on this journey.
Excellent. Sam, you got a bonus tip?
And I think, again, just to add now some more to that, absolutely with that advice that's available. We don't have to reinvent the wheel because there's a lot of prescriptive advice. There's a lot of accelerators out there around like AKS, web apps or app service, should I say. So yeah, there's stuff out there that kind of already hints at how good should look. And then that also kind of assists with that discussion process of what do you have today? Let's look at what it could be tomorrow.
Thanks both. Great discussion there, and hopefully gives people a bit of a view of how to start this and what the sort of process would look like. So thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
Sam Swaby, Senior Solution Architect in the Microsoft practice.
And Michelle Azzopardi, UK Digital and App Innovation Go-to-Market.
Excellent. Thanks both, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.